I was about to leave when my friend's mom whispered, "Stay just a little longer." And my life hasn't been the same since. I hadn't meant to stay that long. The rain had started before I even noticed it, soft at first, then the kind that makes everything feel smaller, like the world is folding in on itself. I'd come upstairs to tell her I was heading out, but she was standing by the window of her bedroom, holding one of those thin white curtains in her hand, watching the driveway blur behind the glass. She didn't hear me knock. Or maybe she did and didn't want to move. The room smelled faintly like something warm. Maybe her lotion, maybe coffee left too long on the nightstand. There was music playing from her phone, low enough that I could only catch the rhythm, not the words. When she finally turned, she looked surprised, but not startled. Just halfway caught between her world and mine. "Oh," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "You're still here." I nodded. My jacket was already on. The zipper was stuck halfway up. "Yeah, I was just." She moved toward me, slow, calm, as if she didn't want to disturb the air between us. "The rain's gotten worse. You should wait until it slows down." I could have said something simple, "It's fine," or "I don't mind getting wet," but the words stayed stuck in my throat. She was close enough now that I could see the faint crease beneath her eye, the tiredness that doesn't quite go away even when someone smiles. She turned away again, walking to the dresser. Her fingers brushed a photo frame. Her son's graduation picture, the same one in their hallway. "You boys always rush off," she said softly, as if to the photograph. "Never sit still long enough to notice when something's changing." I laughed under my breath. "We notice. We just don't know what to do with it." That made her pause. She looked at me then, really looked. Not the kind of glance that checks if someone's listening, but the kind that feels like a question she doesn't want to ask. The rain tapped harder against the glass. She reached for a throw blanket on the bed, folded it without purpose, then unfolded it again. I watched the movement, the quiet repetition of her hands. Something about it felt fragile. "Do you want some tea?" she asked finally. I shook my head. "No, I should probably stay just a little longer," she whispered. The words weren't loud, but they landed like they had weight. My pulse tripped. She wasn't looking at me when she said it. She was still folding that same blanket, eyes lowered, voice careful. I sat back down, pretending I hadn't decided to. The chair creaked softly. She turned her face toward the window again, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. Somewhere between the sound of rain and the muted hum of her phone, I caught my reflection in the glass, beside hers. She looked calm, but her fingers were tightening the fabric in her hands. Mine were still gripping the armrest. Maybe she didn't mean it the way I heard it. Maybe I stayed for no reason at all. But when she finally exhaled, long and quiet, it felt like the start of something neither of us had planned, and neither of us could stop. The rain didn't stop that night. It just softened, the way voices do after something almost gets said. She had moved to the edge of the bed, sitting with her back straight, one leg tucked beneath the other. The blanket she'd been folding was now beside her, half spilled across her lap. I kept glancing at the door, at the hallway light leaking under it. The house felt too quiet for two people who shouldn't have been in the same room that long. "I didn't mean to keep you," she said after a while. Her voice had that trace of apology adults use when they realize they've stepped outside a line they drew themselves. "It's fine," I said too quickly. "I don't mind waiting." "You always say that." She gave a short, dry laugh. "Like patience is something you owe people." That caught me off guard. I didn't know she noticed things like that. She reached for the mug on the nightstand, still half full, the coffee gone cold. She took a sip anyway, grimaced, and put it down again. The simple act of watching her, the way she hid discomfort behind small motions, made something tighten in my chest. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. She didn't look at it. I did. A man's name flashed on the screen for a second before it dimmed again. Her hand froze on the cup's handle, then slowly withdrew. "He keeps checking in," she said quietly. "We've been sorting things out." I didn't ask who he was. I already knew. Her ex-husband. The one her son never spoke about. The one who sometimes came by in the evenings and left before dinner. She rubbed her temple and sighed. "Sorry, that's not your problem." I wanted to tell her it wasn't, but it felt like it was. Or would be, soon. The silence stretched, filled with all the things neither of us wanted to name. She looked toward me again, eyes tracing the line of my jacket sleeve, my still damp hair. "You'll catch a cold," she murmured. Then, after a pause that didn't sound accidental, You've grown up since I last saw you." Her words hung there. I could feel the heat rise in my neck, my throat suddenly dry. "You make it sound like it's been years," I said, half smiling. "It has," she said simply. "You were a boy who used to eat cereal in my kitchen and forgot to rinse the bowl. Now you're—" She trailed off, her gaze flickering downward before she caught herself and looked away. "You're different." The lamp on her dresser flickered, dimmed. The storm outside rolled again, distant, low. I shifted in my chair. "You don't seem different." She gave me a look I couldn't read, something between amusement and disbelief. "That's the problem," she said softly. "I should be." I laughed once, but it came out too quiet. I looked at her hands instead, resting in her lap, fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. My chest ached with the weight of something I couldn't name without breaking it. "I should go," I said finally. She nodded, eyes fixed on the window again. But when I stood, her hand reached out, maybe by instinct, maybe by choice, and brushed against mine. Just once. Just enough to stop me. Neither of us moved after that. Her hand stayed where it was, trembling slightly, like she wasn't sure if she wanted to pull back or hold on. The rain hit the glass harder again, and somewhere inside that sound, her whisper found me. The smallest exhale of a word I couldn't quite hear. But I felt it. And I knew leaving wasn't going to be as simple anymore that I didn't see her for a week after that night. I told myself it was for the best, that I'd imagined half of what happened in her room, that I'd read too much into a look, a whisper, a brush of fingers. But when my friend asked me to drop off a charger he'd left at home, my mouth said sure before my mind had time to stop it. It was a Saturday morning, bright and careless. The kind of day that makes pretending easier. She opened the door in a loose sweater, hair tied up, no makeup. For a moment, it felt like the air left my lungs. Not because she looked perfect, but because she didn't seem to notice me the way she had before. Like the world had returned to normal, and I was the only one still catching up. "Oh, it's you," she said with a small, polite smile. "Come in." "He's still asleep, as usual." I stepped inside, holding up the charger like a peace offering. "I won't stay long." "You always say that," she said, half smiling now. The kitchen smelled like toast and citrus. Morning light stretched across the counter, hitting the small cracks in the tiles she'd once complained about. She moved around quietly, boiling water, opening a cupboard, her movements soft and unhurried. I stood there awkwardly, unsure where to put my hands. She noticed. "Coffee?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." When she reached for another mug, her sleeve brushed mine. It wasn't much, just fabric against fabric, but my pulse stuttered like it had been waiting for that exact moment to prove me wrong about letting go. "You've been busy?" she asked, filling the silence. "Trying to be," I said. "Classes, work, pretending to be an adult." She smiled faintly, looking into the cup as she poured. "That doesn't stop." "The pretending." I laughed, too quickly, then looked at her, really looked. There was something different about her today. Not colder, just contained. "You and him," I said, before I could stop myself. Are you too?" She set the kettle down, eyes still on the steam. "We talked." It didn't fix much. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't. When she turned, there was something in her face, a mix of softness and warning. "You're kind. You know that?" she said quietly. "That's dangerous." I wanted to ask why, but she was already sliding the mug toward me. I took it, careful not to touch her fingers, and failed anyway. Our skin met for a second, a quick, electric mistake. She drew her hand back like she'd touched something hot. I caught her wrist without thinking. Not tight, just enough to make her look at me. "Maybe I shouldn't come around for a while," I said. Her mouth opened like she wanted to protest, but the sound of a phone buzzing on the counter cut through the space between us. She glanced at the screen, then at me. Her ex's name again. Neither of us moved. The phone stopped ringing. The silence it left behind was too loud. She pulled her wrist free gently, her voice quieter now. "You should go before he calls again." I wanted to argue, to stay, to explain the things I couldn't name, but all I could do was nod. I turned toward the door. Then, as I reached for the handle, she said softly, "It's not that I don't notice." I froze. When I looked back, she was already facing away, pretending to check the kettle, her reflection trembling in the metal like a secret she wasn't ready to admit. I didn't plan to see her again. At least, not alone. But plans, I was starting to learn, didn't stand much chance against coincidence, or whatever it was that kept pulling us back into the same spaces. This time it was the cafe near campus, the one with creaky floors and the burnt smell of overworked espresso machines. I saw her before she saw me, by the window, reading something on her phone, stirring coffee that had already gone cold. I could have turned around. I even half-turned, ready to leave, before she looked up. "Hey." Her voice was soft, surprised, not unwelcome. "It's been a while." I hesitated, then walked over. "Yeah, you look good." It sounded stupid the moment it left my mouth. She smiled anyway, a tired kind of smile that said you don't have to fill the silence for me. "Sit," she said, nodding to the chair across from her. I did. The chair scraped against the floor louder than it should have. I winced. She didn't comment. For a minute, neither of us spoke. The air felt thinner near her. She was wearing a dark blue sweater, sleeves pulled over her hands. A tiny coffee stain near the cuff she probably hadn't noticed. "How's your son?" I asked finally. She looked out the window, as if the answer was somewhere out there. "Busy. Avoid me, mostly." She smiled without warmth. "You know how 20-year-olds are." I nearly laughed, but the words caught in my throat. I wanted to say. "I'm one of them." Instead, I said, "He talks about you sometimes." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, only good things, I hope." "Mostly. He said you've been trying to sell the house." Her eyes flickered down to her cup. "Thinking about it." A pause. There are too many memories in there. Her fingers traced the rim of the mug slowly. Around and around again. The same rhythm she used when she was thinking too hard, but didn't want anyone to notice. The air between us shifted then, just slightly, but enough. "I've been meaning to call," she said suddenly. "After that morning. I just didn't know what to say." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You didn't have to say anything." "That's the problem," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I keep not saying anything." Something inside me tensed. I wanted to ask what she meant, but her eyes met mine, steady, unblinking, and I knew. The hum of the espresso machine filled the silence. Someone behind the counter called out an order, breaking the spell for half a second. She looked down, exhaled, then spoke so quietly I almost missed it. "You made it harder to pretend." I didn't breathe. The words landed like the edge of a truth neither of us should have been holding. "I didn't mean to," I said finally. "I know," she said. "That's what makes it worse." Her hand was resting on the table now, fingers curled slightly, inches from mine. I stared at it, at the way she wasn't moving it away. My pulse jumped. "Do you ever think about that night?" I asked. Her lips parted, then closed again. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. More than I should. The silence after that was unbearable. I could hear every sound in the cafe, the hiss of milk frothing, the squeak of shoes on tile, but it all faded beneath the thud of my heartbeat. Her phone buzzed. She didn't look. Neither did I. I reached out. Just barely, just enough for my fingers to hover over hers. Not touching. Not yet. She didn't pull away. Then she whispered, "Don't." I froze. But when I looked up, her eyes weren't warning me. They were asking me not to make it real. For 3 days after the cafe, I replayed her whisper. "Don't." It wasn't rejection, not exactly. It was something more dangerous, mercy disguised as restraint. By the 4th day, I told myself I was done thinking about her. That was the morning she texted. "Can you stop by later?" Something about your friend's laptop. It was a lie, the kind that pretends to have a reason. I knew it. I went anyway. When she opened the door, she looked different. Not in appearance, in posture. Like she'd spent hours deciding what tone to use and still hadn't found the right one. "Hey," I said. "You found the laptop?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Not exactly. Come in." The house felt emptier than usual. Fewer framed photos, fewer signs of her son. There were boxes near the stairs, half-packed, unsealed. "You're moving?" I asked. "Thinking about it," she said, brushing dust off a shelf. "It's time." The words landed flat. She was avoiding my eyes, pretending to straighten books that didn't need straightening. Then a voice echoed from the hallway. "Mom." Her son, my friend, was home early. I froze. He walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder, stopping short when he saw me. "Oh, hey man, what are you doing here?" Before I could speak, she jumped in. "He came to help with the Wi-Fi. It's acting up again." He nodded slowly, suspicious but not curious enough to press. "Right. The Wi-Fi." She smiled too quickly. "Didn't expect you back till tomorrow." plans changed, he said, dropping his keys on the counter. His eyes flicked between us. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It was the kind that made every heartbeat sound guilty. I'll go check the router, I said, grasping for an exit. Good idea, she replied, too fast again. I crouched by the cabinet, pretending to adjust cables that didn't need adjusting. My hands were shaking. I could feel her watching me, or trying not to. Her son leaned against the wall. You okay, Mom? You look, I don't know, tired. I'm fine, she said softer. Just a lot on my mind. He looked at her for a long second, then shrugged. All right, I'll be upstairs. When he was gone, she exhaled hard, one hand pressed to her chest. That was too close. I finished it. I didn't see her for nearly a month. The boxes stayed by her door each time I passed the house. Never moved, never sealed. A silent confession of indecision. I told myself she was gone, that leaving was easier than explaining, that she'd done what any sane person would have done. Then, one evening, she wasn't gone. Her car was in the driveway. The upstairs light glowed through half-drawn curtains. I sat there in my car for what felt like forever, rain whispering against the windshield, before I finally got out. I knocked. The door opened just enough to show her face, startled, guarded, then softened by something like exhaustion. I didn't think you'd come, she said. I didn't think I would either, I said, voice low. She hesitated, then stepped back. You should come in before someone sees. The living room was dim, the faint smell of paint still hanging in the air. Most of the photos were gone from the walls. It felt less like a home and more like an echo. I thought you'd moved, I said. I tried, she answered. Packed everything twice. Unpacked it again. Guess I didn't know what I was running from. I nodded, but my throat felt tight. Maybe it's not running. Maybe it's staying still that hurts more. She looked at me then, a long, searching look that seemed to weigh every word I'd said since that first night. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I know. Then why are you? I swallowed. Because pretending we don't care doesn't make it true. Her breath caught. She closed her eyes, hand gripping the edge of the table like it might steady her. You don't understand how much this could cost. I don't care what it costs, I said, stepping closer. I care what it's worth. That made her look up. For a second, the room held its breath. She moved then, not away, but sideways, as if giving me a choice. My shoulder brushed hers when I passed. She didn't flinch. I can't be who you think I am, she said softly. I'm tired. I've made mistakes. I'm not. She stopped, voice breaking slightly. I'm not someone you should be trying to save. I'm not trying to save you, I said. My voice cracked. I just don't want you to disappear before I can tell you that you mattered. The silence that followed was unbearable. She turned away, one hand covering her mouth, eyes glistening. You're too young to mean that. Maybe, I said. But that doesn't make it less real. She laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. You think this ends with a confession? No, I said quietly. I think it ends with a choice. Her hand dropped from her mouth. The tears didn't fall, but they shimmered there, unspent. I took a slow breath, then reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The warmth of her skin felt too human, too close to everything we'd tried to ignore. She whispered, almost trembling, if you stay, everything changes. I know. Her thumb brushed against my wrist. Once, gently, before she pulled away. Then she said the one thing I didn't expect. I'm leaving tomorrow. My heart dropped. Where? Does it matter? I stared at her, at the weight of her quiet resolve. Will you tell him? She shook her head. No. Some truths aren't meant to be shared. The rain outside grew heavier again, the kind that fills the spaces words can't reach. I nodded once. Then I guess this is goodbye. She smiled, soft, sad, and final. It was always going to be. I turned to leave. My hand was on the doorknob when her voice found me one last time. Thank you, she said, for seeing me when no one else did. I didn't turn back. I didn't have to. Her reflection in the glass said everything. She nodded. Then her eyes fell on the boxes again. That's why I texted. I needed to say goodbye, maybe. The word goodbye hit sharper than I expected. You're really leaving? I can't stay here, she said. Every corner feels like something I can't explain. Or someone, I said before I could stop myself. She looked up then, eyes raw and tired. You think this is easy for me? No, I said. I think you're trying too hard to pretend it didn't happen. Her jaw tightened. Nothing happened. Exactly, I said quietly. And that's the problem. The room went still. Even the ticking clock on the wall felt too loud. She took a step closer, her voice low. If he ever found out. He won't, I said. Because there's nothing to find out. Right. Her eyes flickered, something between agreement and denial. I could see the pulse in her throat, the way her hand twitched like she wanted to reach out and couldn't. Then, from upstairs, "Mom? Are you coming?" Her lips parted, but she didn't answer him. She looked at me instead, one long, unfinished look that said everything words couldn't. Then she whispered, "You should go before I change my mind." And for the first time, I didn't know which of us she was trying to save. A year has passed. The house is gone. Someone new lives there now. Younger couple, 2 kids, laughter spilling through open windows the way sunlight used to. I walk by sometimes, not on purpose, just when my route happens to bend that way. The mailbox still has her last name, faint beneath the fresh paint, like a ghost the new owners haven't noticed yet. My friend moved out months ago. We talk sometimes, about work, about life, about nothing. I never ask about her. He never mentions her. Maybe that's the silent truce we've made, to leave what happened in that quiet, rain-soaked room where it began. But the truth is, she never really left. Not in the way people think leaving works. Some nights, when the city feels too loud, I remember the sound of her voice saying stay just a little longer. I remember how careful she was with words, how much they weighed before she let them fall. I remember the pauses, the spaces between what we said and what we couldn't. I've learned to live inside those pauses. I see her reflection everywhere now, in strangers leaning against cafe windows, in hands that linger too long on a cup, in quiet laughter that doesn't need to be heard to be felt. She taught me that intimacy isn't always about touch. Sometimes it's the ache of holding back. Sometimes it's the courage to leave before something beautiful breaks. I used to think what we had was unfinished. Now I know it ended exactly where it had to. A few months ago, I got a letter. No return address, just my name written in that careful, looping handwriting I'd memorized without meaning to. Inside was a postcard, a photograph of a small coastal town. No words, just an ink smudge near the corner, like she'd almost written something and changed her mind. I keep it tucked inside a book I haven't finished. Maybe that's fitting. Some stories aren't meant to be tied off neatly. They just live inside you, rearranging quiet parts of who you are. When people ask me now what I learned from that time, from her, I never give the full answer. But here's what I know. That love doesn't always look like the beginning. Sometimes it's about recognizing when not to. That being seen, even once, can change the way you carry yourself forever. And that sometimes, the people who cross your path aren't meant to stay. They're meant to wake you up. I still think of her on rainy days. Not with longing, but with gratitude. For what was said. For what wasn't. For teaching me that silence can be honest too. When I pass that house now, I don't slow down anymore. I just nod at the open window and keep walking. Because maybe that's the truest kind of closure, learning to keep going without needing the last word. Movie camera viewer reflection. Did this story stay with you? Would you have wanted him to stay that night? Or leave, the way he did? What kind of quiet, imperfect love stories do you want to hear next? The ones that fade like memory, or the ones that dare to return when you least expect it?